Hi, I'm Paul Arthur. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Prime Minister Trudeau announces $5 billion in aid for Ukraine. Plus, the federal Liberal leadership race sees the French debate tonight with the English debate set for tomorrow. And with only 3 days to go until the Ontario provincial election, Doug Ford releases his party platform.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News.
Thanks for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is not ruling out sending Canadian troops to Ukraine as part of a possible peace deal. Trudeau is in Kyiv with a dozen other world leaders to mark the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion. When asked at a news conference whether Canada is willing to send troops to help maintain security in Ukraine, Trudeau announced Canada will send $5 billion in aid to Ukraine using funds from seized Russian assets, and also pledged additional military aid.
But let us be frank, you and the Ukrainian people should never have had to endure even a single day of this unjustified, brutal war, let alone 1,096 of them. That is why I am announcing Canada will be providing 25 more LAV-3 infantry fighting vehicles to Ukraine. We will be delivering 2 armoured combat support vehicles which Ukrainian forces will be trained on shortly in Germany. Landing systems for F-16s were delivered just 2 months ago, and 4 F-16 flight simulators will be provided in the coming months. And that's on top of the millions of additional rounds of ammunition, components for drone cameras, and first aid kits. We're also dispersing the first installment of the $5 billion in assistance to Ukraine funded through revenues from frozen Russian assets, along with providing a grant to help Ukraine maintain its energy security in the wake of consistent, reckless attacks by Russia on Ukrainian energy infrastructure.
Trudeau pushed back on Russia's narrative that Ukraine bears responsibility for igniting the war. He says the fighting began 3 years ago because of Russia's desire to erase Ukrainian history and expand their empire. Meanwhile, at a press conference at the Oval Office, U.S. President Donald Trump says Russian leader Vladimir Putin would accept European peacekeepers in Ukraine as part of a potential deal to end the war.
Would you support the idea to send European troops in Ukraine to back the ceasefire?
European troops may go into Ukraine as peacemakers. So when the agreement is done, they can watch that everything's followed properly. I don't think that's going to be a problem. And a lot of the European countries, I think, I don't want to speak for France, but I know that the president's talked about doing that also. I think that'll be a very good day when we can go in as peacekeepers as opposed to what's going on right now with everybody being killed.
Will they have U.S. backing, those troops going into Ukraine? Will they have U.S. backing from U.S. troops?
Well, we're going to have a backing of some kind, and obviously the European countries are going to be involved.
You convince Vladimir Putin to accept the European troops as peacekeeper, would you think?
Yeah, he will accept that.
He will accept
I've asked him that question.
You talked to him?
I've asked him that question.
Is France going to lift the block on the...
Because he's not, look, if we do this deal, he's not looking for more war. He doesn't mind, but I've specifically asked him that question. He has no problem with it. I think the war could end soon.
How soon?
Within weeks.
Weeks?
Yeah, I think so. Right?
Trump also stated that he's hopeful the United States and Ukraine will soon come to terms on a rare earth minerals deal. He said Ukrainian President Zelensky could potentially visit Washington this week or next to sign the deal. Over the weekend, across Canada, there were gatherings at city halls, museums, and community centers on the eve of the war's third anniversary, amid fears of a withdrawal of U.S. support.
Ukraine is still suffering. Every single day we're talking about politicians that are talking, but we are dying. Ukrainians dying every single night. Last night, Russia launched 264 Shaheds in Ukraine. And how many people died? And unfortunately for the world, it's a statistic now. But it is someone's father, it's someone's brother, it's someone's son, and it hurts that people forget about the war that's happening every single day.
Ukraine wants peace more than anybody on this planet. If Putin wanted peace, he would just take his army out of Ukraine and there'd be peace tomorrow within 24 hours. He doesn't want it. Ukraine was living peacefully and was invaded. Ukraine is the victim here. And to say that the perpetrator is somehow the victim or that the victim is to blame makes absolutely no sense.
Since the start of the war, Alberta has welcomed close to 65,000 Ukrainian evacuees into 213 communities. That's according to the province's Parliamentary Secretary for Settlement Services and Ukrainian Evacuees, Jackie Armstrong-Homeniuk. In a statement released today, she says, "Today and every day, our full support lies with the people of Ukraine," adding they have become our friends and neighbors and are now among the threads that, woven together, create the fabric of our province. Federal Liberal leadership candidates are about to face off in two high-stakes televised debates in Montreal. The first debate is in French tonight, and an English debate is set for tomorrow. These two events are the only chance Liberal supporters will have to see Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, Karina Gould and Frank Baylis together. The Mark Carney campaign released details about his economic and housing plans today, pledging to double the pace of new housing construction over a decade and cap immigration until it returns to sustainable trend lines. Ruby Dalla was disqualified from the race Friday afternoon. A Liberal Party committee claims that Dalla made 10 violations of contest rules. Dalla vehemently denies the allegations and filed an appeal on Sunday. The leadership race will conclude on March 9th with the possibility of a federal election following not long after. Meanwhile, Ontario's Progressive Conservatives released their platform today with only 3 days until Election Day. It contains $40 billion in promises, plus a proposal to get rid of the minimum retail price for liquor. Ford's platform does not include a full costing breakdown of how he would pay for his promises and contains some promises with no cost estimates, such as his plan to build a tunnel under Highway 401. The platform includes a few previously unannounced measures, including a $5 billion Protect Ontario account to help respond to American tariffs and over $700 million to expand STEM and skilled trades training capacity at post-secondary institutions.
We have the greatest tradespeople. A lot of them are right behind me. That's the future. We're investing over $2.5 billion into the trades. That's the future standing behind me. These are the people that are going to be building the $200 billion of infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, the highways, the hospitals, the schools, the long-term care homes. So we believe in investing. The other two parties believe in one thing: tax you to death.
A coalition of unions and groups are suing the Trump administration south of the border, saying that an email from the U.S. Office of Personnel Management directing workers to justify their jobs was unlawful. Billionaire Elon Musk issued an ultimatum to federal employees over the weekend, posting on his social media platform X that employees must respond to an email justifying the work they completed this week. He added failure to respond will be taken as a resignation. In a surprise statement made by the Vatican, Pope Francis showed slight improvement in laboratory tests today and resumed some work activities. It's the 11th day of his hospitalization for a complex lung infection that has provoked the early stages of kidney insufficiency. Nicole Winfield with the Associated Press has more.
Vatican says Pope Francis is showing some slight improvements. He remains in critical condition with pneumonia, but laboratory tests show some improvements in certain parameters. He is still receiving some supplemental oxygen, but at reduced levels of concentration. In addition, the Pope was able to resume some work activities in the afternoon. He made a phone call to a parish in Gaza. This is a parish that is headed by an Argentine priest. Pope Francis has been calling them daily since the war. He was able to resume that call this evening. Later on tonight, the Vatican No. 2 will be presiding over a rosary, a prayer in St. Peter's Square. All of Rome has been invited to come and pray for the Pope's health.
Police in Halifax have identified the 19-year-old suspect accused of stabbing a 6-year-old child on the weekend. Halifax Regional Police issued a statement today saying Elliot Chorney is facing charges of attempted murder and possession of a dangerous weapon. Police say Chorney was arrested Sunday afternoon where a child had been found suffering from life-threatening stab wounds. Investigators say the victim and suspect are not believed to be known to each other. The Alberta Legislature will open its spring session tomorrow, with Budget Day coming on Thursday. Mental Health and Addictions Minister Dan Williams held a news conference today announcing that if Budget 2025 is passed, it will invest $180 million over 3 years towards 2 new compassionate intervention centres in Calgary and Edmonton.
Each of these 2 new facilities, 150 beds, will provide medically supported detox, counseling, therapy, and massively increase Alberta's capacity for secure mental health and addiction care to the tune of 300 new beds a year, which means potentially thousands of episodes of treatment a year. We know that we have an urgent crisis of public addiction on our streets and our communities, and we will be continuing to build addiction treatment capacity with recovery centres and partnering with third parties like Fresh Start here today to make sure we meet the need of Albertans when it comes to providing the opportunity at recovery for every single one suffering from addiction. When it comes to compassion intervention itself, Alberta's government is looking for options to speed up implementation, but temporarily using existing infrastructure for the delivery of this care. For many families, compassion intervention is their last hope at recovery and the last hope at life for their loved ones. Alberta and all of Canada has unfortunately seen too much destruction and too many lives lost to simply continue without compassionate intervention.
Construction is expected to begin in 2026 and will be completed in 2029. The legislation could allow courts, police, or families to place their loved ones into mandatory addiction treatment. Support workers across Calgary's public and Catholic school boards are set to hit the picket lines in what's gearing up to be a province-wide strike. They join thousands of fellow union members in Edmonton, Fort McMurray, and Parkland County who have been on strike in a weeks-long wage dispute. The Canadian Union of Public Employees says workers in the Foothills and Black Gold school divisions will also be joining the strike. Union leaders say the job action could go Alberta-wide by spring if the province doesn't step in. In local news, the Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services Public Safety Communications Centre will now be providing fire dispatch services for Blood Tribe Emergency Services. The collaboration between the 2 Southern Alberta organizations was announced at a ceremony earlier today. Heidi Echeverria has the story.
A partnership between Black Tribe and Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services ensures a better and faster response to emergency situations for Black Tribe. Travis Coleman, Fire Chief with the Black Tribe Emergency Services, talked about the importance of this teamwork.
We started with our training events in Lethbridge, where we, again, just have had nothing but success with our training together. We did a professional development day where some of the LFD guys came and actually trained with us and came to our presentations that evening at the Sandman Hotel in Lethbridge there. And then ultimately just got working at it. And then it took about a year to finalize everything with TELUS and making sure the towers are all right, the radio services and everything. And yeah, signing on with PSCC has just been awesome. Another initiative that we've been working with Chief and Council is an addressing system out here. So we have a full addressing system that's just about to be unfolded. So this is where every house on Blood Tribe and every commercial building is all going to have house numbers and addresses, where this is something that we've worked towards. We want to provide the highest level of service for Blood Tribe members that we can, and this is just one of the other steps that we've taken forward to do that and provide the highest level of service for Blood Tribe.
I think the members of the Blood Tribe and the people that live out here can rest assured that when they're calling 911 and reporting a fire, that it's being answered by the Lethbridge Public Safety Communications Centre. And our dispatchers and our centers serve a large portion of Southern Alberta. And having the departments having a common dispatch center and the ability to communicate with each other on the portable radios, I think adds a huge amount of interoperability between the departments, the ability to respond. In addition, our center is able to use and leverage the technology that we have as far as mapping and other information, data, stats, and all sorts of different tracking that we can offer through our center. will only help improve emergency response for Blood Tribe.
I think, just based on the historical kind of dispatching, we feel that it's a lot stronger moving forward. And again, at times we have the mutual aid with the Lethbridge Fire Department and EMS Department. So as is the case today, at times if we're not able to make it, for example, on the north end of our nation, the Lethbridge team comes in. So it just makes it that much more stronger as far as the response time. And again, the locations on the reserve being able to be that much more advanced in responding to some of the areas. And we know, we have a vast area on our nation. So, having that those descriptions as far as where people are at is so key.
For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echavarria.
Court cases for 3 people in a fraud investigation have wrapped up in Lethbridge. On February 4th, Lethbridge police charged 5 people for alleged identity fraud and the forging of documents. That followed a fall 2023 investigation when LPS said hundreds of forged identity documents and equipment were seized from a North Lethbridge home. They alleged that multiple subjects attended financial institutions and fraudulently opened bank accounts, credit cards, loans, and other accounts in the names of the identity theft victims. Here are the names of the individuals, the first 2 receiving 12 months of probation, 15 days in custody for the third, but with credit for time already served, will spend just 1 more day behind bars. The 4th person will stand trial on August 11th on numerous fraud-related charges. No updates could be confirmed for the 5th suspect, who was underage at the time of her arrest. The Pronghorns women's soccer program at the University of Lethbridge has a new head coach, Cedric Beauvon. Currently serving as the girls' technical director and League One head coach for the Calgary Blizzard Soccer Club, Beauvon says he accepted the role at the U of L because he saw a rare opportunity.
Obviously, U Sport opportunities are few and far between, so personal goal for me was always to end up in an environment where I could pursue that, but Lethbridge really was aligned with my values in terms of what I was looking for in a department, in a school, and that was what was really exciting for me.
Throughout the entire interview process, it was clear that he was somebody that would fit what we've got going on here. As I've said before, we're a smaller Canada Western Youth Sports institution, and we believe that our strength is that we can work together to drive our programs forward. And so that was something that we talked a lot about with Cedric, and it became clear as we worked our way through it that he values those same things.
I have some connections from youth players that have moved here to Lethbridge to play youth sport, and so using some of that familiarity to my advantage and connecting with players that I already have a relationship with will help hopefully ingrain myself within the group.
Beauvon also spent time as an assistant coach for the Calgary Dinos women's soccer team and the Mount Royal University Cougars women's soccer program. Well, more warm weather on the way. Real nice if you can put up with the windy conditions. Details coming up. Let's take a look at our forecast. A warming trend is upon us this week with double-digit high temps across the board. Tonight, expect a chance of rain showers or flurries and a low of 1 degree. Tuesday, a mix of sun and cloud, the wind coming from the southwest at 20 kilometers per hour, becoming west at 50, gusting to 70 in the morning, and a high of 11. Wednesday, sunshine and 14 for a high, much the same for Thursday and Friday. Sunny and 15, and then 14. And heading into the weekend, Saturday, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 14. Slightly cooler for Sunday with a high of 11 degrees. Checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is +3 with an average low of -9. The record high was 19 degrees set back in 1983, and the record low was a frigid -32 set back in 1919. The sun rose at 7:25 and will set at 6:06. Let's see how Tuesday is shaping up across Canada now. Victoria and Vancouver under a wind warning with the southeasterly winds of 70 gusting to 90 kilometers an hour. Rain for both cities and a high of 12 for Victoria, 11 for Vancouver. Now moving to the prairies, a mix of sun and cloud for Calgary with a high of 10. Mainly sunny conditions in Edmonton, but cooler with a high of 5. Both Regina and Saskatoon will be mainly cloudy with a high of 1. A bit warmer in Manitoba with mainly cloudy conditions and a high of 3 for Winnipeg. And moving to Ontario, Toronto, a 30% chance of showers or drizzle with a high of 4. Much the same in Ottawa, a 40% chance of rain and a high of 2. Similar conditions for Montreal, showers and a high of 5. In Atlantic Canada, rain showers or flurries for Fredericton with a high of 9. A mix of sun and cloud and 7 degrees for Halifax. Mainly cloudy in St. John's with a high of 1. In Charlottetown, a 60% chance of flurries and a high of 4 degrees for Tuesday. Canadian Pacific Kansas City mechanics have ratified a new collective agreement with days to spare before a strike deadline. CPKC and Unifor confirmed the news involving the 1,200 mechanics today, which makes it the second contract greenlit by railway employees in Canada this month. This comes as binding arbitration for 3,300 engineers and conductors continues after a work stoppage that happened last summer. Unifor President Lana Payne says the mechanics achieved gains in working conditions, job security, and work ownership after members voted 99% in support of a strike mandate last month. Canadian hardware companies say U.S. tariffs could challenge their suppliers and manufacturers. They say there would be pressure on the economics of their businesses if U.S. President Donald Trump imposes 25% tariffs on Canadian goods and Canada retaliates. Ontario-based chipmaker Ranovis says if it's hit by levies, customers likely wouldn't accept higher prices. It says customers would demand the company get all its production work done somewhere freer of duties, like Taiwan. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe is going on another trip to Washington to advocate against tariffs and promote free trade. Moe leaves today with a delegation of business leaders from the steel and energy sectors. The province's agriculture minister is also going to promote farming's role in providing sustainable and affordable goods to the U.S. Temu will allow Canadian businesses to sell goods through its platform. The online marketplace says it would be the first time Canadian businesses would be able to list their products directly on the e-commerce platform. It's positioning the initiative as a way to expand Temu's product base while speeding up fulfillment orders. Temu began in China and started allowing Canadians to make purchases through its marketplace back in February of 2023. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up slightly on the day to 25,151. The Dow was up 33 points to 43,461. The S&P 500 was down 29 on the day to 5983, and the Nasdaq was down 237 points to finish at 19,286. West Texas Intermediate oil was up 53 cents to $70.93 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 25 cents to $3.98 US. Gold was up $18.19 to $29.52.19 US an ounce, and silver was down 16 cents to $32.35 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.57 per bushel. Barley is at $6.58. Canola is at $15.02, and corn is at $8.38 per bushel. Live cattle were up $1.08 to $198.90. Feeder cattle March contract was up $4.35 to $272.30. Lean hogs April contract was down 28 cents to 87.40, and the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 70.10 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Prime Minister Trudeau announced today that Canada will send $5 billion in aid to Ukraine using funds from seized Russian assets. And he also pledged additional military aid and stated that he is not ruling out sending Canadian troops to Ukraine as part of a possible peace deal. Coming up after the break, foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari talks about the likelihood of Trump imposing tariffs and America's attempts at brokering peace between Russia and Ukraine. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews.
As a possible trade war looms over Canada and the United States, Canadians and Americans alike face further uncertainty. U.S. President Donald Trump is likely to make good on his promise to impose stiff tariffs on Canadian goods imported into the U.S. And to talk more about this is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us from Los Angeles. Lisa, the latest Canadian commodity that faces the threat of 25% tariffs is our country's lumber. Now, as a Los Angeles resident, how do you see this threats living so close to residents who are working to rebuild their homes following devastating wildfires in your area?
Yeah, there's a debate. Look, it's like everything else that Donald Trump puts forth, right? What those who love him understand that this is, what he's attempting to do, or will try to at least, try to make sense of it. And then those who are against it, it becomes even a bigger issue than it really is. Let's break it down. So for Donald Trump, this is, he's a businessman. This is how he believes he will get certain behaviors from friends and adversaries alike, right? So with dealing with Mexico in our southern border, Canada in our northern border, he feels as though in the first couple of weeks, I'm not speaking for him, an observation is that, in the first couple of weeks, he got some things done. He got Canada and Mexico both to be much more participatory in keeping the borders safe. And that's a goal, obviously, of the United States, to keep our national security, or at least observe it much more, and to bring Canada and Mexico in, because all three will benefit from that. With regards to tariffs, now I actually spent the weekend at a conference that is basically capitalism first kind of thing. And there was a lot of debate among people who study this day in and day out. And of course, they're anti-tariff. That is not the way to keep markets free and flowing and organic, obviously. But when it comes to leveraging what the United States can do, some see it as that stepping stone. Now, should this be an all-out tariff war, that is probably not the goal that Donald Trump has in mind. But to your point, will he keep his word? I do believe that he will. He did it before with China as well. But the goal being that he won't have to go that far. One thing that I do appreciate, being a student of foreign policy and that being my arena, is that Donald Trump as a leader, and I know this doesn't benefit the Canadians, but as a leader, when dealing with our friends and enemies alike, I do think that it is he does negotiate from a place of strength when he does leave all options on the table. So when you deal with the Canadians or the Mexicans, or on the other end of that spectrum with the Chinese or Iran's regime that are actual adversaries, when all options are on the table, he believes that he will get better results that way with regards to behavioral changes.
And many Canadian leaders, including Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith, have made some progress in helping wane off these tariff threats from becoming a reality. So as an American, how do you see it? Is Canada doing enough?
Well, it looks like we're going in the right direction. I think that is actually the goal for Canada, not to sit across the table from the United States in a tariff war, but to sit side by side and to do things together with regards to the economy and trade, and obviously with national security and keeping the border safe. So I do think the ultimate goal is to have both sides benefit from both the trade and security. But I think that the initial growing pains, if you will, of this are the optics don't look good, right? Donald Trump comes in, he wants to make Canada the 51st state. And, he does give a lot of fodder to the enemies. But if we step back and look at really the ultimate goal, and I'm not saying that we're going to get there, we may not, but I think that that's the intended goal, is to work side by side with our neighbors.
And French President Emmanuel Macron met with President Trump this morning, and this meeting comes after Macron called for an emergency gathering of world leaders after the Trump administration excluded Europe from sitting at the negotiating table to settle the war between Ukraine and Russia. What's the latest?
Look, Donald Trump came into his presidency having, vowed to end all these senseless wars, obviously, Russia's invasion of Ukraine being one of them. Now, the way that he's gone about that is to really isolate each one and to deal, separately, to meet with Putin, tell him this is XYZ is what you're getting, and to bring him on board. And it looks like Putin is coming around. And then on the other end, to really alienate Zelensky and Ukraine and to say, you know what, this is your best bet ever. You have to, get what you get and not get upset, what we tell our toddlers, right? The Europeans, on the other hand, are very much feeling left out of all of this. Donald Trump is going at this, alone. Macron, for his part, has tried before to intervene and be some sort of moderator. Remember the optics of him sitting across the table, a very, very long table from Putin, and trying to do that to no avail. So now emergency meeting has been called. He went to the White House early this morning to try to at least get a piece of the pie, or at least, figure out what's going on, or make himself relevant in this arena.
And 2 explosive projectiles reportedly were detonated near the Russian consulate in Marseille, France. A third soda bottle thrown over the perimeter wall of the facility reportedly failed to explode. And officials are labeling this as a terrorist attack?
Yeah, it's already being called a terror attack. This is on the anniversary, again, of the war beginning with Russia invading Ukraine. And it's happening in France, which is an interesting place, since we just talked about the French leader meeting with Donald Trump, and again, inserting himself in this, in potential ceasefire talks between Russia and Ukraine. But, there's a lot of people, and I have spoken to people over the last week who are very much upset about how this is going down, and they feel as though Ukraine is being trampled upon once again. I do want to say, regardless of how the ceasefire is going about, I think the priority is that we do get a ceasefire and that we do end this very, very senseless war. I do not believe that Putin is being empowered by this deal. I think that the goal, again, is to end this and then deal with the consequences going forward. But there's no way to reverse what has happened. I don't think you can get Putin out of Ukraine for the 20% that he is occupying right now. And the best bet for both sides is for this to end, for there to be no more casualties. And I know both sides have suffered tremendously. And I hope that the Ukrainians, just like the Russians, would want to end this as soon as possible.
And as you mentioned earlier, we're now at the 3rd anniversary since the Russia-Ukraine war broke out. Leaders from the European Union and Canada gathered in Ukraine's capital to mark the event. There was no representative from the United States at the meeting, however. This comes amid growing uncertainty over Washington's support for Kyiv. Meanwhile, President Trump says the talks he's had with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky have not been fruitful.
Yeah, look, Zelensky does feel as though he's getting the short end of the stick. He doesn't believe that he has the United States' support. But we have to also juxtapose that with what he was getting from the Biden administration to really, come into Washington, D.C., be given that royal treatment, have the red carpet rolled out for him, and then to come and to shame Congress to give him more and more and more money. And he was given so much money and weapons and such. And look, this, to what end, right? To what end? And I think a lot of common sense foreign policy people like myself, it's not that we want Russia to win this war. It's that we want this war to end. And it doesn't look like there will be any sort of more positive outcome than today. Every day that goes by will be worse for Ukraine and for Russia, for that matter, in the sense that, they've lost, I think over 100,000, soldiers in that war. Of course, they have a larger population, but we're dealing with a madman. And I don't think that Donald Trump has really forgotten that. I think that he is dealing with him in a certain way because he is a madman. And I don't think that this is, this shows any sort of trampling of Kyiv, just that this is the way it needs to end, and it does need to end. And we shall see. I think that Zelensky needs to play along if he wants this to end, and this is not the time to flex muscles. I don't think that this war, if it can, again, benefit Ukraine in a way that Zelensky would be happy. He cannot win this war, and that's really the bottom line here.
Now, turning our eyes over to the Middle East, Hamas has released 6 more hostages in exchange for more than 600 Palestinian prisoners as part of their ceasefire deal. Now, Lisa, 6 for 600 sounds like a very one-sided deal. How do you see it?
It's not just that. It's not just 6 for 600. 600 among them deadly terrorists who have, tremendous blood on their hands. If you read the specific stories of some of these terrorists and what they have done, people they have killed, children, stabbings, bombings, and to exchange them for 6 civilians. If you look at these young people who were just taken, many of them from a concert, a peace concert, by the way. Yes, obviously very, very, very lopsided deal, but that just goes to show you how Israel is very much going to do what they can to save even one life, and that is how they value life. And then you look at suicide bombers and the culture of death and the parades when they give back these soldiers or when they give back the hostages or when they gave back the coffin of dead babies, how, they come to watch, and thousands gather with their young children to, again, indoctrinate and radicalize and to show that this is what we applaud. Just over the weekend, I also want to add the Bibas family. That was a development where those two redheaded children that we have seen, many pictures of throughout the last year and a half since this war began. It turns out that they were not only, brutally kidnapped and tortured along with their mother, they were murdered by bare hands, by the terrorists' bare hands. And that's really not an image anyone can get out of their minds. I think those children will become really the faces of this war. And yet you don't hear any global outrage for the way that these children were barbarically killed and how this war continues in that way. And their mother, it was like a bait and switch. They returned the wrong coffin and she wasn't even in there. You think about that father that has to go on living without his wife and two young children. It's horrific. And the fact that you're dealing with a terror organization that celebrates all of this, that celebrates bloodshed and celebrates terrorism, and how they radicalize their population. It's really a very uphill battle for the entire world. This is not just about Jews, and I think that's a point to very much drive home here. Over the last week, we also heard about 70 Christians being beheaded in the Congo by another terror organization. It's horrific. It's a global crisis that has to be fought. And unfortunately, many of that ideology and many of these useful idiots who follow and support that ideology are here in Canada and the United States and really cheering on Hamas and Hezbollah on our very streets and on our campuses. So this is a much broader war that's made its way here to the West. And I think it's something that people have to focus on, beyond the war that's going on in the Middle East.
And President Donald Trump's envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, said on Sunday that he would aim to negotiate an extension of Phase 1 of the Israel-Hamas hostage release and ceasefire deal when he returns to the region. So how will he go about accomplishing that? And is there any hope that he can maybe even out some of the lopsidedness of this deal?
Well, let's see, because look, Naveen, the problem is that we should not negotiate with terrorists. The Trump administration came in on the 1 yard line already, being in talks with Hamas. The Biden administration before them, going to Qatar many times, sitting down with Hamas, trying to come out with a ceasefire or some sort of hostage deal, to no avail. We shouldn't be sitting across the table from Hamas because the only language that a terror organization understands is force, and that's very unfortunate because Israel's in a very difficult and challenging position trying to get those hostages back alive. And it's very difficult to go in with force when you're trying to really tweeze out, 30 or so, that's how many hostages they believe to be alive in a population where they're, underground and in tunnels and being, hidden all over the place. So in Witkoff's position, he will try to go back and negotiate something better because Hamas not only has not kept up with its promises, the way that they're going about it is just horrific. And, I think he'll need this extension because the initial ceasefire deal was supposed to be a phase out process. And, as time goes on, the chance that those hostages are alive or, not being further, tortured and brutally just it's just horrific the way that they're being abused, the stories that are coming out. So time is of the essence, and I think that it is smart for Witkoff to go back to the table and remind Hamas where the United States stands and how we stand behind our ally Israel. I think that is a very, very strong position that is a pivot from what we saw with the Biden administration, because even though they did support Israel, there was some daylight and there was some hesitation and there were some weapons that were withheld and some intelligence that was withheld. So I think this is a very it's a stronger position and it will hopefully benefit the situation.
And Pope Francis has entered his 10th day in hospital, but the 88-year-old pontiff remains in critical condition, and some tests show some early signs of kidney failure. There's prayer services being held around the world. Should the Catholic Church be concerned over what some believe to be a dying pope?
Yeah, it looks like that's the way this is headed. No one wants to see, bad news about anyone, particularly the Pope. It looks like it is kidney failure at this point, and that is never a positive prognosis for anyone. So obviously prayers all around the world, and we will keep our eyes on this story.
She is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Lisa, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Child abuse isn't something we typically like to talk about, but I think we can all agree it needs to stop. Joining us today is Christine Cassie. She is the CEO of Chinook Sexual Assault Center in Lethbridge. Christine, thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate having you on.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. First off, can you maybe give us a brief overview of what the Chinook Sexual Assault Center does?
Well, the Chinook Sexual Assault Center has two main programs. One is the Sexual Assault Center, which provides a range of services from crisis intervention to therapy, including peer support groups, what we call system navigation. So sometimes people's lives just aren't going as well as what they'd hope they'd be because they're dealing with the impacts of the trauma that they're experiencing. So we'll help negotiate their way through certain systems that they want to deal with. We also provide specialized police and court support as well. So for those people who do want to go forward to report to police, because there's no statute of limitations in Canada, we will support them through that process all the way through to the court process with that as well. Beyond that, we also have our signature program, the Child and Youth Advocacy Center, which is also called Chinook. Can never use that name enough, it seems. Chinook Child and Youth Advocacy Center deals with children 0 to 17 years of age that have been identified through children's services or through policing services throughout southwestern Alberta that have been abused, and either sexually abused, severe physical abuse, or severe neglect, or have been exposed to domestic violence. And so we actually broker the child forensic interviews to be done in a child-friendly, culturally sensitive space that we host, as well as then supporting the non-offending family members and the child throughout the court process and how they learn to heal through therapy and other resources that we have here.
Well, pretty heavy stuff that you're dealing with over there, Christine, for sure. Like I said earlier, child abuse, of course, isn't a topic we love to talk about, but you believe that it is, in fact, important to have those conversations about the issue.
Absolutely. What we know from the stats, both from a prevalence study that was done through the Alberta Association of Sexual Assault Services and stats that we get through policing agencies and child welfare agencies across Canada, is that it impacts about 1 in 3 kids. And so we look at a 34% prevalence rate really for child sexual abuse alone. In the city of Lethbridge, that would mean about 6,800 kids that may be impacted by some form of sexual abuse or some sort of sexual violation. So these are really staggering numbers that we're dealing with. We also know that this is one of the leading issues that leads to, when the trauma hasn't been resolved, that leads to sexual assault later in life. So there's a direct connection of what's going on here. We also know those that have had that exposure to domestic violence, that are seeing that violence in their home, that they're living this out day after day, that this also leads to other behaviors and things that absolutely impact then how they respond to others as they grow into adult life and how they receive others. So what those healthy relationships may look like. And so our ability to be able to identify, to address, to intervene, we need to do, because if we don't deal with that trauma early, we know that we're setting up for a lifelong struggle.
What are some of the signs that a child may be experiencing abuse? What should we be looking for?
If you're an outsider looking in, sometimes what you may see is, certainly if it's physical abuse, you might see some bruising that really can't be explained on what that is. You might see some withdrawal behaviors are happening where they're not part of their regular or normal activities. You may see disassociation when they're in a school setting where they aren't able to focus. That could be for anything from physical abuse to domestic violence or sexual violence that's happening in the home. But you're going to see these changes in behaviors that are happening that way. For kids that are neglected, you may see that they don't have the proper clothing, they don't have the proper food to eat, things like this. You might see them losing a lot of weight, whatever that might be, and just in a state of neglect in that way. For others, you're seeing them as lost and not really doing so well because they aren't necessarily having those emotional connections where they need them. For any of us looking in, it's important to ask some questions about what's going on. Do you need anything? What might I be able to help with? Asking about how that what's going on. And certainly we see teachers are great for this in being able to recognize things. Schools are a big factor in a child's life, and they help to identify when these types of things are going on. Family members too sometimes get really concerned and will make those calls, those very difficult calls to make. But we know when you make that call, if we can get in, an assessment can be done, we can intervene early. And it doesn't mean that the family is going to be necessarily torn apart. It may mean that they're getting the resources they need to be able to work through some very difficult times, to learn some different behaviors. Some of us grew up in a time where spanking was, pretty much, that was the only parenting style. And although some of us, we may joke about it now, it's really not acceptable anymore to do that. There's other ways that we can parent and discipline our kids, and how we can put healthy boundaries in place to help people, progress. Beyond that is looking at who's having access to our kids, and how do we identify when our child might be being groomed. How to identify when our family is being befriended because someone wants to have access to our children in that way. And so knowing some of those signs and what to look for is really important. And again, just knowing that, people are a call away and they really do want to help with that. And that both is through the Sexual Assault Center, the Child and Youth Advocacy Center, and a number of other resources that we have in the city of Lethbridge.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned a lot of things there. And of course, it can manifest itself in a number of different ways. Like you were mentioning neglect. I mean, it doesn't just come in the form of physical abuse. So what are some of the main types of child abuse?
Really, we see the predominant thing that we see is actually sexual abuse, which is, probably the scariest of them all. If you talk to people, this is what they shy away from talking the most about, is that this can happen to those that are under the age of 18, and it happens to people of all ages. And it's, people do prey on the vulnerable. And the more vulnerable we are, and children certainly meet that criteria of being vulnerable, there is there are predators that are looking for that. So for us to be able to break that cycle, I'm sorry, to answer your question. So sexual abuse is the main one we're seeing. We're also seeing physical abuse. We're seeing a lot of exposure to domestic violence in this area, emotional neglect and neglect. So those are the 5 primary areas that we're seeing. And again, we deal mostly with the sexual abuse, the severe physical abuse, and the neglect.
Yeah, you were mentioning before some stats there. I'm just curious, how prevalent is it in our society? Did you say 6,800 cases locally in the region?
I said that's what the 34% would work out to when we look at the population of children in the city of Lethbridge. So it is a 34% prevalence rate for sexual abuse itself, let alone for other forms of abuse. But it is like, almost, 1 in 3 children that are experiencing some form of abuse in our society. So it is quite high when we're looking at this. And again, we see the same thing when we look at adults when it comes to sexual assault. It is quite high. And so there's lots of ways that we can intervene and that we need to intervene and really see this and have these fruitful conversations so that people can take the topic seriously and to make those reports, even when they're feeling, I don't want to get involved. We know we all don't want our neighbors to be mad at us or to have that, awful situation, but we always have to put those children first.
Yeah, we kind of have a role as individuals in society to help. Almost like it takes a village to raise a child. It's kind of true in that case, isn't it?
It's absolutely true. I mean, first, it is legislated that we are supposed to doing that. There is, fines that you can receive if you if you knowingly neglect reporting child abuse that's happening. They rarely take issue with that, but I think morally we have that obligation. Very much like you said, it is a village that raises a child, and we have to be looking out for each other in this society if we really want to make those changes.
Right. Christine, about a year ago or so, the Chinook Sexual Assault Center opened a new facility for the Chinook Child and Youth Advocacy Center. So maybe tell us about some of the features of this new facility and why it's important.
Fantastic. Yes, so this is actually based on 40 years of evidence-based research. It actually originated out of Alabama and is widely used throughout the world, but predominantly in North America. So we're one of, I want to say, 8 child and youth advocacy centers in the province. What a Child and Youth Advocacy Center does is that it actually brings all those very messy pieces from police reporting or children's services, the medical exams, the need for psychologists, the school system, all together so that we can actually look at a case of child abuse. We call them triaging child abuse and seeing what those needs are. We can actually walk them through prepare them for a child forensic interview. So there's a process for that. And then actually work on those pathways to treatment and to healing for the child and the family. So the work isn't done independent of the family. It's done with the family, with the child for it to be most successful, and then to see them successfully through the court case. Where the child interview becomes really critical is that quite often children had to tell their story not one time, but several times. So they may be telling it to the doctor, they may be telling it to the police, they may be telling it to children's services. And every time that they're having to tell their story, they're being re-traumatized in that abuse that they've suffered. So having a really well-constructed child forensic interview is paramount to the success of the court case. And so at the end of the day, hopefully you have more people that are able to be convicted of these crimes, which again helps to mitigate those risks to other children. So part of that is we'll identify one interviewer for that child, and if let's say if it's police doing the interview, children's services would sit in a monitoring room and be able to get their notes at exactly the same time of what this is. When the tape is really well done, that tape then can be submitted to court as evidence. The child doesn't have to go into court to state what the abuse was. They still have to be cross-examined, but they don't have to state again what they went through. So again, you limit the number of times the child has to speak directly to the type of abuse that they endured.
Right. That's amazing. And you know, that's the case with any victim that has to go through this again and again. Is there any thoughts on that happening for anybody that's been through a horrific situation?
Absolutely. Well, even, there's always a misnomer when people think that they have to come to a sexual assault center, they have to tell us all the details of the sexual assault, and you don't. We aren't secondary witnesses to the crime. We know it's horrible. We believe you, and we just want to know how you're doing and how you need to get to that next step of where you want to be. So that's what we're here for. And so I think there is, police are much more trauma informed than what they were before on this. And so this is why this model is widely adopted throughout North America. Is we want to do better by the kids, and we know if we can do better with the children, we're going to do better with the adults in time. That we're actually going to circumvent children growing up to being abused yet again and again, or the possibility that other harm is going to be done to other people. And so these are those ways to actually mitigate those types of risks in our society and to help people really thrive, because everyone needs that fair shot to make it through life and to be contributing citizens. So
Definitely.
yeah.
What about the work that you're doing to prevent abuse from happening? Are you working kind of with the parents that have sort of been doing this, or is it more of a let's get in front of the issue before it even gets there?
I guess there's two different ways that we work with things. When it comes to the Child and Youth Advocacy Center, the work is done with the non-offending parent and the family members that are connected with that child for that support. And again, how they're attaching with that child, how they're supporting that child, if there's other children who've been abused in the home as well, and how they're going to, reconstruct their lives after this, and how to move forward with that and what those child needs are. And so that's that therapy process. So both through some Connect parenting groups that are done, and some other groups that are done, as well as some therapy that is done by the folks that we have here. The other side is that there's an early intervention program that we have that's called Who Do You Tell, which we take out to schools. And it's a 1 hour program. We go in and we talk about, who do you tell if something is going on in your life that, is pretty scary. And so the difference between keep and speak a secret. So the keep secrets are, the fun surprise birthday party that's coming up. The speak secrets are the ones that are causing harm, that are making you feel awful inside. And sometimes telling their parents may not be the safest person in their life to tell, right?
Sad but true. Yeah.
Sad but true. And we've seen this happen in, athletic programs with gymnastics and things like this. It might be a coach that's doing something, or a player on a team that's doing something, whatever that is. Who can they go to if something is disrupting their life in this way? And so that's what the program's about. And we come back for a second time. And actually, we've had a number of disclosures that have come through this process. What that helps to do is it sets the stage that kids first know that it's good to talk about this, that it's okay to talk about this. So when someone's asked them to keep a secret that's this awful, that they don't have to keep it, that there's places they can go to. So that's more of an early intervention type program. The other thing we do is we go out and we do training, and we've done training with churches, we've done training with professionals, with other agencies, with community groups that just want to know more about child abuse, want to know more about how to receive disclosures, and we do that type of training as well. So again, let's not be scared of the language, and let's talk openly about child abuse. Let's talk about sexual abuse and sexual assault, because these are the realities that are happening in our world, and we do need to address them. And so how do we get people comfortable with that language so that we can actually move forward and address these issues and be healthier? And most of us, we all want our kids to grow up to pay their own bills, but to be healthy and to be happy. And so these are ways that we can do that. And so let's move that forward.
Wow, such important work that you all do down there at the Chinook Sexual Assault Center, and such a heavy topic. But thanks so much for being with us today, Christine.
Thank you so much.
Yes, appreciate having you on. Christine Cassie is the CEO of the Chinook Sexual Assault Center in Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.